welcome everyone. I'm very excited to be hosting Jim Lahey tonight. I mean, I have to be honest, when I got the call that Jim wanted to come to London, I was so excited because Jim literally changed my life when I had 3 tiny kids. And he taught me how to bake bread without kneading through his book. And now he's sitting here. Now I feel like we're old friends because we're baking all day. Quick introduction. I'm Hannah, for those who don't know me. This is my home in this very intimate living space of ours, where I love to build community through all kinds of food events, mainly by breaking bread over the table. And so it's amazing we have a baker here tonight. But no, I mean, I write about food, I teach classes, I run all kinds of food events, but this is about bringing people together through food, with food really being the vehicle for connection. Jim is here tonight because they have reissued for the 15th anniversary, right?
Yeah, I can't believe
My
it.
bread.
Only 15 years. Crazy.
So Jim is a James Beard Award. He was the first ever award winner for Outstanding Baker. Amazing. He owns Sullivan Street Bakery, which, I mean, we go back further to the No Knead Bread from when I was at University in New York and Sullivan Street Bakery opened, and I was so excited. I remember it in 1994. I was living there, and there I did trot along, and here we are today in the living room. So food brings everyone together. Tonight, I really wanted to, well, first of all, welcome Jim to London. You haven't been here in how long?
27 years.
27 years.
20,
well,
yeah.
Welcome back. The food's a little different.
Yeah.
The food's a little different than it
I
was.
was going to say, like, when I was here, there were no skyscrapers.
Oh, wow.
I think there was one skyscraper, but yeah, the first thing I noticed was like, oh, London Rising.
It's amazing. So, so Jim is most famous for his No Knead Bread Method. Anyone here who has baked bread in the last 20 years probably read that famous article by Mark Bittman in the New York Times, probably read the original book of My Bread, which changed how we all bake, really. Mm-hmm. So I feel like this is a very symbiotic group because, Jim, you're originally an artist.
Yeah.
Started in art, then moved to bread. Tell us everything. I feel like I've known Jim a while now.
My big fear is I don't embarrass myself by saying something.
You can't. This we're amongst friends.
I know, but I, you know.
Not with us.
Not with us. Everyone here has done something more embarrassing. I can probably.
My assistant's shaking his head. No. Well, I started out as as a kid who didn't really think much. I mean, I had maybe a thirst for knowledge, but I didn't really apply myself, nor did I have like the support to. I wasn't like, my parents didn't care if I got good grades. I think they were more concerned that I was happy. Right.
There's something in that, though.
Yeah, but they were like, but their plans for me were like, you know, why don't you get a job working for the village, like attending the park or picking up garbage, and marry a local girl, that type of thing, you know, kind of like very, very humble, you know. I was the only one of my siblings that went to college. I decided to go to art school. When I was 16, I ended up having, I was explaining,
this is amazing.
A neuropathy in my tongue, so I couldn't speak properly. And I had to teach myself how to speak again, which kind of gave me the skill set to learn to acquire languages. That comes in handy later. Fast forward, I go to art school. I'm kind of a precocious, maybe weird kid. Who looks at people in the eyes like this all the time, and I couldn't figure out why people were kind of like so turned off by my behavior, but so be it. Had a kind of a couple of breakdowns emotionally, which is like a typical thing when people are in their 20s, right? And then went to a university on the prompting of a wonderful teacher named Michael Glear, who was an amazing artist. I admired him, and went to university to study whatever, everything, anything I was interested in, and I had to learn a foreign language, so I decided to learn Italian, and I somehow convinced my folks to foot the bill on a summer trip to Italy, and that one summer trip kind of changed my life because all of a sudden I saw food culture. I saw this, like as you were saying, community based around food. I ate a tomato that, like, I had almost a synesthetic experience with, sensorial. And I really loved the bread. In particular, what I really loved was Nutella.
On the bread?
On the bread.
Yeah.
No one knew what Nutella was in America.
Really?
In 1987, no.
Wow.
And so when I came back...
We were still in Jif.
Yeah, you could find Nutella in like Italian markets, that's it. But it wasn't like everywhere. There were no Whole Foods. There were no like large supermarket chains like there are today. I think that the sort of food culture that we kind of take for granted now wasn't really that developed. Farmers markets were just kind of like beginning. I ended up trying to make these Wonder Bread, or the kind of standard loaf of bread, the industrial bread, just didn't cut it with the.
So is that when you came back? So you came back.
I came back and I was like, I have to learn how to make a bread like this. And I bought a book from this. I bought a just general cookbook from Anne Willan.
Yeah.
So I bought her La Varenne La Pratique, and I studied it, and I baked all the breads, and I just became a obsessive home baker. Fell in love with this woman in college at Stony Brook University. She was weirded out by me, and did the appropriate thing and put a wall up between us. And then I went through like a period of extreme. My first period of like depression, like it was like when you just like walk down the street and you see something that reminds you of we sat on that rock in Central Park, and you're like and so I started going to therapy, and obviously my shrink I think helped me a little bit, but in this period I started baking. I had a year of 37 jobs. Like I actually am brilliant at bullshitting people. and I'm really, really good at convincing people that I know how to do anything. And so but these are crappy jobs. I mean, they aren't like, I did like art restoration. I had to wear a sandwich board and hand out flyers on 6th Avenue and 43rd Street.
And were you baking this whole time?
The entire time I became obsessed with baking bread.
When we spoke, you referred to it, and I've written it down and I've carried it with me, an unacknowledged coping mechanism.
It was absolutely a coping mechanism, but I wasn't conscious of the fact that it was a coping mechanism. It was just something that gave me...
A ritual.
Well, it was also like the word cathexis.
Right.
Catharsis, not cathexis, catharsis. Okay. It was cathartic to actually go through the process of managing the dough. First it's one loaf of bread, and then all of a sudden I'm lining a home oven with quarry tile and pavement bricks, and I'm like, it's taking like 2.5 hours for the oven, just 3 hours for the oven to get to temperature, and then I'm loading the oven up with so much bread that I don't even need to add steam.
Wow.
I rig, but I'm doing all these things that are like totally like inappropriate. A gas oven. I'm like shoving like rags into the exhaust of the, But I was actually at that point living in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, before Williamsburg, Brooklyn was like the hipster place that it is today, and my nickname was the Bread Man. And I would go to the local pub, like down the block from my house, and I'd give people bread, and I'd get beer, and it was
the old school barter system.
It was really wonderful. And then I ended up meeting my job 1992, job 36, was working for a little artisan bakery in New York City. It had just opened, called Amy's Bread. You ever heard of it? She was open for 3 months. I was like part of her startup crew. And then I ended up working for restaurateur Joe Allen after 3 months. And the reason why I left Amy's is because I couldn't stand the way she had broken up the process. There was one person mixing, one person shaping, one person baking, or a crew per phase. And I was like, you have to do the whole thing. You have to mix. It's like from mixing the dough to realizing a finished product.
Well, then you own it, right?
Well, yeah. And then somehow some caterer named Stephen or David or whatever said you should go check out Orso Restaurant. They might be looking for a bakery. And it turned out that Joe was actually at that time considering opening up a bakery here in London, which is kind of funny. And so I ended up without knowing this, they end up hiring me. I didn't meet the old guy, but I ended up working at the restaurant as an artist wants to work 3 days a week, get paid as much money as possible, and then have the other 4 days to fuck off.
Were you sculpting still? How was the art? How was the art and the bread coexisting?
My work was more conceptual than
Right.
anything else. I mean, my work was really weird. I think actually I was just at the Tate Modern, and I just it's interesting. Let's put it that way. I mean, a third of it is going to just end up being rubbish later. I mean, I don't think we'll have any long-term value, just because it's some of the work it's too difficult for people to hit them over the head so they understand immediately. So, I mean, that's the problem with a lot of modern art. And so I'm doing this conceptual art. I'm trying to get gigs in like clubs and to do installations and all this other stuff, multimedia installations, and baking bread, both for fun and now for profession. In fact, I was being paid back then $21.50 an hour. This is
Wow.
Which would be like the equivalent of $50 an hour, or be the equivalent in English of like 40 pounds. Right?
It's a lot.
Well, it's enough.
It's what you get paid now in a kitchen, basically.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was perfect. I could work 3 days. I had plenty of time for volleyball and beers at the park at nighttime, and I could do my artwork. And I end up somehow the gig lasted for about 3 months, and they're like, it's really, really nice having you work here. Really appreciate it. Right if you get work, if you open up a bakery, we'd love to buy bread from you. And my assignment was over. I'm like, oh, fuck. Shit.
Now what?
And so I don't know how I did this, but I'm like, would you guys be interested in fronting me some money so I can go to Italy and learn how to bake bread? And for some reason they said yes. And I said, I'll pay you back. I promise I'll pay you back. And they gave me a couple grand, like $3,000 or $4,000. And then they said, oh, by the way, when you're on your way back, do you think you could stop by our restaurants in London and maybe show the Chef Martin, what you've learned? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And it was like this really cool thing where I went to Italy, hung out with my friends in Tuscany, picked porcini mushrooms, smoked lots of hashish. It was brilliant. And then, and made bread. And actually, it really wasn't that. It was like I actually traveled from Milan to Rome, and I zigzagged and just looked for bakeries by word of mouth. And I usually would stop older people because I figured that they knew where the good food was. And in my broken Italian, I would say, Signora, sai dove un buon panificio, un panificio che fa un pane tradizionale? And they would tell me, oh, you have to take this bus down this road, and then you have to cross over a bridge, and then you have to, descend some stairs, and then pass the hardware store. And I got these really weird places. And I ended up at these little bakeries in the middle of fucking nowhere, and find these incredibly beautiful craft bakeries where, the bakers are like dressed in underwear, basically, and a sleeveless shirt. And it looks like something from the medieval period, right? Feudal period, with like linen fabrics hanging from rods, and breads that proof couched on boards. It was pretty fucking cool. And I'd take lots of drawings. I'd sweep. I'd just be like a helper, and I'd ask as many questions as possible. And I did that for like about a month until I landed in Tuscany. And that's where I hung out and picked porcini mushrooms and had fun. And then I ended up going to London, hanging out with the chef, showing them everything I learned, making some bread. I kind of think I surprised them because I don't think they were expecting me to be able to do much. I was like 26 at the time, and more than half my life ago. And I came back to New York, and that was it. It was like I think I spent like the next year trying to get consulting gigs. And I think my claim to fame at that point was I worked 28 days and I made $31,000. That was like I felt, but to get those 28 days of work, I had to hustle for like 250, you know.
Yeah. So where did the no knead come in? Because the no knead is really like,
so the no
that
knead,
really, when that Mark Bittman article came out in the New York
So the
Times.
no knead, I lived in San Gimignano, 1991 for 7 months. And when I was in Sanji, there was only 2 parking spaces. And you could walk down the main via and not touch anyone. It was brilliant. It was like, wasn't crowded at all. Now forget about it. It's like going to the British Museum at, Taylor Swift concert might be more convenient. So I ended up, my friend Renato, or the owner of the house I ended up getting, my girlfriend and I, who traveled to Europe in 91, Eileen, we ended up joining a group called Servus. You ever heard of it? No. It's a really interesting, it's an NGO that started in Denmark, in Copenhagen, after World War II. And what it consisted of was a network of travelers and hosts. And the idea was that if we're all friends with one another because we know each other, we won't want to kill each other if we go to war. And so the word service, I think, means to help in the language of Esperanto. So that was the official language of the group, although no one speaks Esperanto. And but someone had said, "Hey, you want a great way to travel through Europe without spending any money? Join this group." And you would have a guide for every country, and it would either be a day host you could meet with for a cup of coffee or take a tour of a museum. But there would be engineers, physicists, doctors, like all forms of profession, all classes, all everything. It was pretty brilliant. And I ended up, when we were in Europe, we ended up going to Italy. We ended up meeting with some people in Tuscany that were these religious fanatics. And then they turned us into sort of like slaves for like 2 weeks. It was pretty brutal. Yeah. Like clearing brambles and in orchards and stuff with no protective. It was pretty bad. And then we escaped to another farm of anarchists in San Gimignano.
So it was quite a crew.
Oh, it was great. It was brilliant. And then, but the anarchists were cool. So Renato, the owner of the husband of the owner of the house, mentioned that you don't have to knead dough to make pizza dough. That's all he said. He didn't go elaborate in it. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean you don't have to knead dough? And I just took it for what it was worth. I never thought about it again. And then a couple years later, after I had, when I was working for Joe Allen, or a year later, they had also sent me to Miami to look into opening up a bakery. And this is when Miami was like nothing, right? I mean, like no one or nothing was there. And I tried making the same breads I was making at the restaurant. And every time I would knead the dough, it would just fall apart in my hands. But I did notice that the moment that I mixed the flour and the water together, it was perfect. So I'm like, I'm going to stop. And what I did was just turn the dough to give it strength and not knead it. And that's kind of like where the practice of doing this method. I had already been making breads using very minuscule quantities of yeast and allowing the dough to ferment slowly overnight. So that wasn't like an innovation. But what was the innovation for me was like not kneading the dough, but then also coming to the conclusion that what's universal about bread is wheat, right? And water, but water is not the same everywhere. And the water itself, depending on its minerals and compounds within it, can affect fermentation and how dough comes together.
Also, wheat's different.
Wheat's different too, but let's just say you don't need potable water to make edible bread.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of an interesting fact. Like you can, I mean, not that you'd want to take water from the Thames, but maybe if you go to
you have a recipe for seawater though.
That bread is actually one of the funnest. If you can find a clean beach, like go up to Scotland or maybe Wales. Yeah. But if you can get seawater and you make bread with seawater, the dough is the same salinity because it's about between 30 to 33 grams of salt in every liter of ocean water, right? which is precisely the ratio of salt in a
loaf of bread.
No. Actually, more in a like Neapolitan pizza dough. So when you make the bread, it is actually quite salty, but it's at this level of salt where if there's just a little bit more salt, the yeasts stop working, and because there's a threshold for yeasts where if you add too much salt, the osmotic pressure of the dough, the osmotic pressure changes in the dough, and the yeast can't like do their job.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because we have a room full of people who probably are either bakers or interested in baking, and that whole notion of the no knead. I mean, for me, it came at a time when I had 3 tiny kids, and there was no punctuation of my day, and all of a sudden, everything. There was like it held everything together, and a loaf of bread would come out of the oven, and it would be such a great achievement. Yet it was so basic. It was that kind of not a monotony, but a rhythm and a punctuation where you literally I would mix it while I was making them dinner, and I would leave it, and in the morning I would wake up and I would bake it.
Well, bread should never be difficult to make. And that
but it was like one of those. It felt like there was a barrier to entry, and then it was also the great sourdough craze.
Yeah.
Like, it was the first. I say the pandemic was the second sourdough craze.
Yeah.
The first sourdough craze was definitely the early 2000s when people suddenly started to realize they could bake at home.
Yeah.
And it was like totally transformative. Yeah. That whole method. I mean, who here's made a no knead loaf of bread? I mean, we've all probably done. Yeah.
One, at least one.
At least one. At least one.
But what's interesting is that if bread, the other conclusion I came to was that if the making of bread required intensive kneading, the Romans would have never conquered the world. and this idea of the miracle of bread wouldn't exist. And also the idea of that water does affect bread making. So like in Italy or in Tuscany, for example, because that's the one region I'm very familiar with. If you ask anyone in Tuscany where the best bread is, they're going to say massa, carrara, where the marble is. And it's a very mineral-rich water, which means that, like, the dough that requires the least amount of work, right? That's the best one. But this method works universally with all water. For example, in up until about maybe 1998 or 2000, the U.S. You've heard about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, right? Now this has a lot to do with our municipalities trying to standardize water, and so they changed the pH of the water to try to make all the water more or less the same, but they didn't change the lead pipes, and because it didn't change the lead pipes, the change of the pH of the water ended up taking out some and basically leaching away some of the lead.
Wow,
that's part of it. But the water in Florida, when I first went there, was like everyone would say, the reason why the bread sucks in Florida is the water. That was like the thing.
That's what they say about New York bagels. It's why they're so good.
Well, that's what they used to say, but now the water in Florida is almost the same. I know that. I remember when I eventually tested the water to confirm my hypothesis that there are high levels of magnesium sulfides or sulfates or sulfides, which can act as a catalyst to cause both the flour and the yeast in the dough to overproduce the enzyme alpha amylase, which is like what's in our mouth. And what this does is it burns the dough out. It would be like if you've ever made a dough that gets too warm. You ever do that, baker? And it gets too hot. It gets over 92 degrees Fahrenheit, or I don't know, it would be in Celsius. And then all of a sudden you have this amylase production in the dough, and it's like, you can't fix it by adding more flour. But in the case of Florida, not today, but then, that was the problem, And then years later, a chef named Cesare Casella for the Beard House asked me to make, because I love apiciu, the apicius. Yeah. I say apicius, but everyone in English says. I think in Italian they say apiciu. I love his cookbook because it's just so amazing to see an eye into the world of Roman culinary tradition. And he asked me to do bread for this dinner, and I'm like, oh, I have to do the dough like this. And that's kind of what revived my interest in trying to promote the method, you know.
And then Mark Bittman came in and wrote about you.
Yeah, there's another backstory about like people trying to put me out of business and stuff, but I won't bother. I won't.
But here you are, so they didn't succeed.
No, they didn't succeed.
So it's really interesting, this series of happy accidents, because I
Yeah.
always feel like that's always, people think you have to set out and be on a mission to do something. So the Italian bread is simply by chance, because that's where you went to study art.
Yeah.
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 So you could have gone to
by
France.
All by chance.
Yeah. It's all by chance. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the Italian breads, are they different in structure to other European breads?
Well, I mean, I learned a lot about Italian breads. Like, for example, before World War II, there was no bread with white flour in Italy. It was all brown bread, for the most part. There were no ciabatta. There were no... the breads were all made with flour that was grown and milled locally and not sifted, because they're looking at the value of the harvest, not necessarily thinking about, making... I mean, there were millers sifting and removing, the germ and the wheat bran, and the endosperm and stuff. But but all the breads were basically brown, and it was because we ended up subsidizing, Europe with flour during the wars. That this tradition of white bread in Europe.
It's all the Americans' fault.
Basically, yes.
I didn't know that.
But in the sense of, well, I mean, if you think of it this way too, like, the tomato is from Ecuador, right? It's not the potatoes from Peru, tomatoes from Ecuador.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's all like a mishmash. Chilies, from Mexico. It's all kind of like, eggplants are from Sri Lanka. Wow. Go figure.
So now we're at Sullivan Street. You've opened Sullivan 30 years. Congratulations.
30 years, yeah. I know. I can't believe it.
You said 5,000
The
loaves
21st,
a day?
About, yeah.
Wow.
The 21st on the 21st of September. Do you remember? On the 21st day of September. No, anyway, sorry. But it's true. It was the 21st day of September that the New York Times officially said that the Sullivan Street Bakery was open. It was the official, because that was the official. The New York Times at one point was a very, very important. It's still important, but it was a very important newspaper for the foodies.
Yeah, still is.
Yeah, it still is.
Cooking, New York Times cooking is.
Yeah, I mean, people still go to church too. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah. I don't know how religious they are.
No.
Unless they're Trump supporters.
And you've survived the pandemic, which was also.
Yeah, we survived. Yeah, we survived. It's funny. We survived the pandemic.
I mean, we all forgotten about the pandemic, but we're all still living in the repercussions of it.
Oh no, we are totally at the rebound. Rebound. We survived the pandemic, and we went from a staff of 90 to a staff of 5, which included me, my wife, a general manager, one baker. I was kind of doing everything, and my daughter, who was like 9 at the time. So it was a very. It went from 90 people to 5 people.
Family style.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was beyond brutal, and we went from that to like 70 people, and it eclipsed our previous sales in 30 months, from April 2020 until November 17th of 2021, and on November 18th, we ended up having a flood, and it shut the bakery down for 40 days, God. 40 days and 40 nights. It was like a...
It was biblical.
Yeah, it was very biblical. It was biblical.
Yeah.
Everyone said I was Job, and I was like... it was actually, we morphed from it was really beautiful, because I had, during that period, called all my competitors before, to reach out to everyone, because I love communicating with people, even though I suck at it. But I love communicating with people, so I'd call people randomly, just impulsive almost like an impulse control disorder. And I would just call random people up. I'd call Tom Colicchio up. I'm like, hey, Tom, how's it going? I'd call whomever, even if they didn't want to talk to me. But I ended up reaching out to all these other people that were competitors. And I said, look, if you need help, I need help. We're all in this together. This is really fucked up. If we support each other, we'll all do well.
It's a community of food.
Community of food.
And were they receptive?
The day the flood happened, I called everyone up. I had 8 bakeries supplying us with bread. We were able to, I wish I had gone further, but it was just so, I just didn't know what to do mentally. I couldn't kind of like grasp everything that was going on. It was also like, all the power had been shut down from the building. The gas had been shut down. We just like had the most beautiful batch of panettone come out. I was like so happy because we'd had like 4 or 5 batches that sucked before.
Panettone is tricky.
It isn't it? It's not. It's all everything's bullshit. Nothing's tricky. Having kids is tricky.
Yeah, that's true. I'll agree with that.
Becoming an adult, growing up and yeah, but it's not tricky. Panettone is easy. We ended up having support from all these bakeries that are would be normally competitors, and it was beautiful. For 40 days, I'd be driving to the Bronx, I'd be driving to New Jersey, we'd be driving to Long Island City, Brooklyn, to gather the bread. We had like camping lanterns, like 15 of them inside the bakery because we had no power. And then the bakery would just be filled with lanterns and like shelves of bread that we'd have to sort and repackage.
Wow. Amazing.
And our customers, for the most part, were cool. But then again, like a lot of the people that were supplying us ended up poaching a lot of our accounts too, because it's New York and everyone's a scumbag. They're not though. They're not. But no, I don't care. It's fine. There's enough business for everyone.
So what's next? Next stage. Sullivan's back off
so,
the 40 days
so,
and 49.
Yeah, so we've grown, and we're just, we're everyone used the word pivot.
Yeah.
During the pandemic period, and everyone's story is so similar. I don't even want to bore you with mine. But we're now in this period of adjusting to the fact that the pandemic really is over.
Yeah.
And we can really focus on growing and guiding the business, not like in a state of survival
or panic.
Like Minecraft. Does anyone play Minecraft here? You guys aren't Minecraft people. All right, wait, I don't either. But there's the creative mode, and then there's the creative and the other mode, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, there's the battle mode. Yeah. So anyway, I ask your children if they.
Yeah, they will definitely know. Yeah.
So we're now in this sort of like we don't have to sell to certain customers that I really don't want to sell to anymore, like big chains and stuff, like companies that don't give a shit if we live or if we die, and are just using us as part of their way of promoting their own company. But we can actually start working with independent chefs and again connect more with the community of people that really love food, because that's the most meaningful thing for me, is like having those connections with chefs and people who love great food, and also the connection with our community and our stores is really, really strong, because I think maybe because we were open for the entirety of the pandemic.
Yeah.
We've really built like a very passionate and loyal following.
Yeah. It's really amazing.
But I'm planning on opening up an organic bakery. But I don't.
Oh, wow.
I can't until the T's are crossed and I's and all that other stuff are made into circles with little smiley faces in them. I can't say that it's going to definitely happen, but it feels like it will happen.
And there's still space for art and creativity outside of baking.
Yeah, there is. I do ceramics for fun, and I still think in terms of that big installation that I'm going to do at the Tate Modern, that will actually blow everyone away instead of the rubbish that's there. But what am I going to say? No, I'm joking. Most of the stuff in the Tate Modern is beautiful. Just like some of it is like, please. How people get grant money for this shit.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's been an absolute honour to sit here with you.
Thank you.
I can't wait to come to New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.